The parent company of MSNBC, as you all know, is Comcast, who was also voted the most hated company in America by consumers multiple times. So, in an attempt to boost the perception that Americans have of them, they decided to use their news organization, MSNBC, to do a 7-minute long puff piece for them. So what they did, presumably, is force their employees over at MSNBC to talk about just how wonderful Comcast is. So they brought on David Cohen, who is the senior executive VP for Comcast, and they talked about how wonderful Comcast is, and it was very Orwellian, and Adam Johnson of FAIR said that this was Sinclair Light, and I think that that's true, that's pretty accurate, because after the Sinclair scandal, after the Ed Schultz expose on MSNBC, it's clear that these hosts probably weren't talking up Comcast on their own accord. I think that they were probably forced to do it. So I shortened the clip. We can't show the whole 7-minute long segment, but here's the most, I guess you could say, disturbing parts.
Tomorrow marks a big event here as we celebrate Comcast Cares Day. Now in its 17th year, it is believed to be the nation's largest single-day corporate volunteer event. And once again, the initiative is locking arms with one of the world's leading nonprofits, Global Citizen. It's all aimed at exploring new opportunities for volunteering, fundraising, and taking action to help stamp out poverty. Joining us now, Senior Executive Vice President of Comcast Corporation and the company's Chief Diversity Officer, David Cohen, and CEO of Global Citizen, Hugh Evans. Also with us, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation and President of the National Action Network, the Rev. Al Sharpton. So we'll start with you guys. Why do we do this as a company?
So I think we do this as a company because as a big company, as a big corporation, we certainly appreciate that we have a responsibility to give back to the communities and to try and improve the communities where our employees and our customers live and work. And when we're organized like this and we can do 17 years of this incredible day of service, which has a huge impact on one day, but is really a celebration of the fact that we care every day of the year and give our employees an outlet to volunteer. We'll have over 100,000 employees, members of their families, and nonprofit partners volunteering tomorrow at over 1,000 projects in more than 20 countries. Wow. So it's really become a global effort. And part of that I attribute to Hugh and our partnership with Global Citizen and his ambitions for Global Citizen, but for partners of Global Citizen like us to help make these efforts have a global impact and not just a domestic impact.
You know, the level of awareness that this brings is so important. The year of Mandela campaign, it's striking to me how we don't teach our own history in this country. And Nelson Mandela, such a global figure, his life, the impact his life has had, and you're carrying on that now.
Absolutely, Mike. So in his final speech at Trafalgar Square in 2005, Nelson Mandela said this famous phrase. He said, "We could be the generation to end extreme poverty." He said that poverty is man-made and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. That's why we're so proud to partner with Comcast, because for the last 5 years, Global Citizen has joined forces with Red Nose Day, with Comcast and MSNBC to really drive citizen action on a global level and also on a local level. The fact that there's going to be, the single largest national corporate volunteering event taking place tomorrow, powered by Comcast, driving citizen action in schools, in community groups, planting trees, taking action for the environment, but also for civil society is really powerful. And this year, Global Citizen has set our sights on trying to drive a campaign that really honors the legacy of Nelson Mandela.
The magic of what has been done with Global Citizens and what Comcast has done from a civil rights community perspective, when I first started talking to David Cohen, I was like, okay, right. But since I've had a show here and I'm here every day, this is part of the culture. People in this building and around the Comcast world are excited about doing what they're going to do April 21st. This is what I think the way we can bring the world to where Mandela wanted us, where corporations don't become expansive and influential just for personal wealth, but for a purpose, so that we have the ability to do good. And I think that's what tomorrow is.
And by the way, our employees feel this. This is
Absolutely.
the best day of the year for Comcast because our employees want to be out in the communities.
David,
do
30
ourselves.
seconds. 30 seconds. Give us a great story from last year, how life changed. Just one.
So I have so many great Comcast Cares Day stories, but I was at a site last year where we were building a computer lab in a school. And the kids are around, their parents are around. We have our technicians there. And near the end of the project, I'm surrounded by a group of the parents. Half of them are crying. So you have no idea what a difference this is making in our community. And without Comcast, we'd have no ability to have this level of teaching, engagement, and helping to bring our kids into the digital age.
All right, Comcast Cares Day, a day that makes all of us proud to work here and work for you.
So what you just saw was the bulk of that clip. And throughout that entire segment, not once did MSNBC disclose that Comcast is the parent company for their network. Yes, towards the end, the host did say that she works for Comcast, but it was really brief and passing. I don't think that they made it clear enough that there is a conflict of interest here. There's literal bias. They didn't make it clear enough. And the irony here is that was on Morning Joe, who just a couple of weeks ago referred to the Sinclair scandal as an embarrassment to journalism. And here they are, doing what is an obvious propagandist puff piece for their parent company, who happens to be the most hated company in the country, not only because they have terrible anti-consumer business practices and monopolies, but because they spend millions of dollars lobbying Congress to repeal net neutrality, freedom on the internet. Now, when it comes to Comcast Cares Day, let's say, hypothetically speaking, that this organization or this effort really does make a difference on people's lives. Well, that doesn't change the fact that it's damage control, nor does it detract from all of the other awful things that Comcast does. And these types of PR stunts are meant to shield the most vile corporations in America from criticism. That's obvious. Because whenever someone calls out how the Koch brothers are buying off Republican politicians so that way they'll deregulate the industries that they are involved in, what's the first thing you hear? Oh, well, you can't criticize the Koch brothers because, they donate to cancer research. Okay, well, two things can be true simultaneously. We can commend them for donating to cancer research and universities and whatnot, but we can also condemn them for what they're doing and their role that they're playing in killing the planet. And they're doing this because they want to cultivate goodwill among the American people because they are fucking us over and they know that we don't like them. So it's true here as well with Comcast. They're doing this because they know everyone hates them. Now I want to get to some parts that really stood out to me. They explicitly compared Comcast to Nelson Mandela in this clip multiple times. Sharpton said, "This is the way I think we can bring the world to where Mandela wanted us, where corporations don't become expansive and influential just for personal wealth, but for a purpose." Al, what the fuck are you talking about? You do realize that you are comparing Comcast to Nelson Mandela, right? You're basically shitting all over Nelson Mandela's legacy here by doing that. You know that, right? You'd think that a civil rights activist would know this, but apparently he doesn't know that. You're comparing a company that wants to kill freedom on the internet so they can censor voices they don't like. Voices against their company and also political voices they don't like. You're comparing that disgusting, vile organization to Nelson Mandela. What the fuck is wrong with you? Now, I also would be remiss if I didn't mention the softball at the end there where the host was like, "Hey, David, 30 seconds. Give us a great story from last year, how a life changed." And just, threw that softball at him. And you could tell that when the Comcast executive answered this question, it was scripted. He knew that this question was coming in advance because he was like, "Oh, I have so many great Comcast stories, but here's this one that I happen to know immediately. I don't have to take any time whatsoever to think about what I want to say or to think of a story since there's so many great ones. I just know exactly which story I want to use." So you knew in advance that they were going to ask you that question and you came up with your answer. It was pre-planned, right? I mean, these are your employees, of course. Of course you knew what they were going to ask you. Of course you knew that they were going to lob you a bunch of softballs. I'm sure that you probably coerced them into doing that. They're not even worried about how we're going to view this segment. It's just blatant propaganda, and they don't even care how it looks. They have zero self-awareness. They have zero journalistic integrity. They didn't even challenge us, presumably, and say, look, this just seems like a bad idea. It's in bad taste. Comcast is our parent company, so obviously there's a conflict of interest. This seems like propaganda. I mean, I'm sure they didn't challenge them, maybe because they were afraid that they were going to lose their jobs. Corporate media, Comcast, MSNBC, these are not trustworthy news organizations and companies. They have one goal, that is to increase their profits. MSNBC only talks about news so long as it doesn't offend their corporate advertisers or their parent company. Let me ask you this. Why did MSNBC not talk about net neutrality? It was the biggest issue in the country for several months. They didn't cover it at all. And when they did cover it, their coverage was atrocious. I talked about this last year. Well, it's because their parent company, Comcast, has lobbied relentlessly to kill net neutrality. So this is nothing more than propaganda, and it really, I mean, this stands out, I think, as maybe the go-to example of propaganda in this country and how parent companies of news networks control their hosts. It's not just Sinclair. I think that Sinclair is probably a more brazen example, but MSNBC, they're doing the same thing. They're doing the bidding for their parent company, Comcast, and that's obvious with this clip.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.